right, down 9,100. Really incredible close today. Pushed the indexes into positive territory. Sort of an unbelievable close. Shows you the strength of the summer rally. We're back with Jim Glassman, Mike Ozanian, and Rick Santelli. Hey, Rick Santelli, really this is on the wires late in the afternoon. The SEC is saying no more naked short selling. No more naked short selling. You got, what, 3 days to cover? If you don't cover, you're out of here. Is that good or bad?
You know what? I don't really have a problem banning naked short selling. I will tell you this, though. It seems like it's been used as a pawn in a giant chess game sometimes, and it is maybe at the heart of some of these rallies. Think back to when they banned short selling of any stature about 6 months ago. But I think, you know what? On the expressway of capitalism, it's okay to have some regulations and speed limits. I don't have a problem with it.
Well, I like the expressway of capitalism a lot more than some of the regulations, Jim Glassman. But you tell me. I mean, the deal is here, you're going to get 3 days to cover. If you haven't borrowed, you can't do it, and you're out. I don't know what they're going to do, drop a neutron bomb on the broker. But a lot of people, as Rick said, has suggested that this whole thing was because of short selling, this whole stock market slump.
At least a contributing factor.
All right, a contributing factor. And important. I mean, you hear a lot about it. I remember in the early 1930s, they blamed the telephone, orders on the telephone for the market decline, Jim Glassman. So I'm not sure I buy into this. Do you want more regulation on short selling or not?
No, I don't want more regulation. I think short sellers are an indication of where the value ought to be. They need to be able to have their say, to make their bets, to make their investments. And, you know, the notion that the problems that we have are through a lack of this kind of regulation or that kind of regulation, I think misses the point entirely.
What's the point? Let's continue this free market thought. I hear a free market pause.
Well, I think the point is that where we ended up, where we have been, is the result of people exercising bad judgment. And I think lenders ought to be able to exercise bad judgment and then pay the consequences. One of the big problems I think we've got is moral hazard, the fact that people are not and businesses are not paying the consequences for their actions. The government steps in constantly, ever since 1987, and I think before that, to rescue. And these rescues cause worse and worse problems. So it's not regulation, it's not rescuing, it's people making mistakes who ought to pay for those mistakes.
And get punished. Failure. Failure is part of the capitalism.
But every time you get to the precipice of failure, they say the system is going to break down if you let this entity fail.
Well, what's wrong with that thinking? What's wrong with that thinking? Mike Ozanian, can we fail? We're going to have a little detour here from the main chance. I want to come back to the banks. I want to come back to, find a bank you hate and buy it. But before we do that, this detour, what about this regulatory assault? All right, Santelli says good. Glassman says bad.
I agree with Glassman. I think that the main problem that caused the big situation we're in right now is the Federal Reserve. They're the ones that printed all the money. They're the ones that kept interest rates incredibly low. But
I thought Bernanke's a hero today. He's a hero. He's out barnstorming. We're going to cover this in great detail. He pumped money in. He said he put the he put the pedal to the metal because he didn't want to preside over a second Great Depression. And you're blasting him.
Yeah, I think that Greenspan and Bernanke are a big reason why the dollar's collapsed, and I think that's going to come home to roost. The PPI was up 1.8% in June. I know only 0.7% for the CPI, but Bernanke's going to have to deal with deleveraging his balance sheet. I read his piece in the Wall Street Journal. He mentioned all the tools he has, Larry, but he never said how and when he was going to do it.
Well, that's an important point. Rick Santelli, by the way, the TIPS auction went well today, speaking of inflation. The inflation-protected Treasury securities went pretty good, and it looks like the forecast for inflation's, what, less than 2% right now. What's Mr. Ozanian talking about, all this inflationism?
You know, I don't think that inflation's around the corner. I've said this all along, Larry, but the notion of the vulnerability of the dollar and the fact that these excess reserves are sitting out there, they're certainly not going to get pulled back by the Fed. It's a matter of time when the consumer does wake up from this Whip Van Winkle snooze they're going through. I just think that at this point in time, these auctions will continue to go well, and you don't really want demand of the tips to be as strong as it was today. Think about the implications.
Well, I hate to see everybody give their hard-earned money to government, period. End of sentence. Jim Glassman, find a bank you hate and buy it. That's been my mantra. I love the banks. I love the financials, because even a banker can make money with a steep curve, which leads me to ask you about that hypothesis and what your investment strategy is overall.
Well, first of all, I agree with you, Larry, that with a steep yield curve, you got to make money as a banker, and I have liked regional banks for quite a while now. I'm worried, I have to say. Short term, I'm bullish. Longer term, I am worried by the kinds of things that government has done, including this load of debt that we are facing. And my advice to investors is that they certainly should get back into the stock market if they're out of it, but that the asset allocation rules that have prevailed for a long time now, I don't think prevail any longer.
What do you mean by that? Expound on that, please.
What I mean is that if people in general were recommending that you should hold 80% stocks and 20% bonds related to your age or to your level of risk aversion, I think it's now closer to 60-40 or 50-50. I don't see the kind of growth that we've had in the past over the last 40 or 50 years going forward for a number of reasons. Some of them demographic, some of them having to do with regulation, some of them simply having to do with the fallout from what we've gone through.
But Mike Ozanian, all right, modest expectations. Let me come back to this. I want you and Rick Santelli. Corporate bonds are having a tremendous run. The spread, the difference against treasuries has come down by 50%. Now, corporate bonds are looking at the same thing stocks are looking at. The credit quality depends on the cash flow, the earnings, the revenues. They're seeing good times ahead. Why can't we make a real good run? I know there'll be pullbacks. I know there are corrections. I rather agree with Jim Glassman. I'm not ready to say we're going back to the prior highs in the stock market. But why not 11 or 1,200 on the S&P, or for that matter, the Dow?
I think you're right, and I think if Obamacare gets killed, absolutely.
What's your estimate on that? Give me an update on your thinking about Obamacare, cap and trade, and other big government threats to
I think cap and trade will be completely diluted to where it'll be ineffective, and being a big tax increase, I think Obamacare will be defeated, and I think that's how we get to your mark in the market. And I do like corporate bonds. I think the risk reward for corporate bonds is better than it is for treasuries right now.
We might have a corporate bond chart. I think, okay, we don't have the corporate bond chart. Rick Santelli, final thought on this one. You're coming back. Conservative Democrats, sometimes called blue dogs. They used to be called yellow dogs. Now they're called blue dogs. I don't know why. Conservative Democrats are emerging, over 50 of them in the House, probably, what, almost a dozen in the Senate. Are they going to straighten this story out in Washington? Is that possible? Are conservatives are they too conservatively pessimistic about the outcomes for governmental policies?
Hey, the party in control is where the blue dog Democrats are having their control. They want to get reelected. The constituents, the public is worried about some of the big expenditures, lots of debt, very little detail. I think the notion that they are in control speaks volumes about an upside to less size, more detail, less debt, and I think that's the direction we need to head.
All right, I happen to think that is inside the stock market. We got to get out of here. We've gone way over, but you're all so darn interesting. Jim Glassman, Mike Ozanian, thank you ever so much. Rick's coming back to poke at Ben Bernanke in a second.